I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
For just $67, you can make as many videos as you want, and you never need to pick up a camera or use any fancy editing software.
and put it on top of your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is when we recommissioned Wyman in 2014, there was not enough space in the building for science labs. So as a result, we provided 4 modular portable trailers that served as science labs to support the instruction and the needs for the school. So by relocating CSMB, there was an annual cost savings of approximately $75,000 by removing those portable trailers. However, there's still a need for 4 science labs within the former Cleveland space. Currently, there's one science lab that was installed during Prop S, and the recommendation is that CSMB and Central share the lab space that was also installed during Prop S that sits right above where the current science lab is located on the Cleveland side. In addition, there are 2 other rooms and spaces that could be converted into labs. Some of the logistics include generating an RFP to disassemble, move, and reinstall the science labs, the furniture and equipment from Northwest and Beaumont into those classrooms and spaces. Due to the essence of time, we will be recommending that the bids be walked on to expedite the process in order for us to ensure that the labs are ready prior to students' return in the fall. So by moving CSMB out of Wyman would open up Wyman, in which the third recommendation would be to move the students from Gallaudet and Naheed Chapman Academy. One of the factors for this move is due to the condition of Gallaudet, in particular the need for window replacements, which you will see some of the costs further along in the presentation. The timeline for the moves are when students and staff leave. The last day, I believe, is June the 4th. So the June 7th, that Monday, we plan to begin the process with a substantial completion or completion date by August 20th. However, generating the RFP will start as soon as we get approval to move forward. Beaumont has served as a hub cooking site and housed other programs such as the cosmetology, CNA, and culinary program. The recommendation is that the culinary kitchen be moved to Gateway STEM. This space, which sits currently above where the current cafeteria is, a lot of the infrastructure is already in place, such as walk-in coolers, sinks, and exhaust fans and hoods. The staff from Southwest Food Service will be moved from Beaumont to Lexington Food Warehouse. Another recommendation for Beaumont is to move the cosmetology program to Vashon. And lastly, the recommendation for the virtual school that Dr. Adams proposed within the consolidation plan is repurposing Dunbar Elementary as a virtual building. Now I'll move to decommissioning. Decommissioning of a school is a detailed process which involves coordinating with other departments as well as other entities. And most importantly, it's protecting the district assets once the building has been closed. So we have decommissioned buildings in the past. We have some preliminary cost estimates for decommissioning schools. In general, elementary schools cost approximately $68,750. And you can see the other estimated costs for middle and high schools. Each of these costs are multiplied by the number of schools that would be closed or consolidating, totaling an estimated cost of $475,000. Other additional costs includes roll-offs, which are those huge dumpsters, and having them being loaded and unloaded on a rotating and regular basis. Costs such as boxes, which are meant for staff to pack up their instructional materials so that they could be moved to their new location. There's other costs within the facilities or the maintenance department, which is done mostly by in-house staff. I won't read them all, but mostly just removing supplies, salvaging any parts or equipment, even some of the pictures or trophy cases or things like that within the buildings. And you could just kind of go down the list. We also have other decommissioning items and safety measures such as motion systems, alarm systems, and a video camera for our chillers. We also maintain the grass, cutting them every 2 weeks, and you will see that there are also vandalism costs because we do get calls from time to time of broken windows and or graffiti on our buildings. My last part of the presentation deals with projects that are being completed during the summer. We call it our summer readiness plan, which is our facilities plan in conjunction with food service, safety officers, or students and staff return in the fall. Again, I won't read all these to you, but they are prioritized based on the needs of the district, as well as some of the COVID-19 guidelines and recommendations provided by the CDC and health officials. First, we want to ensure that our schools are clean upon students and staff returning. We also will be conducting indoor air quality through our third-party vendor, environmental consultants. They will also be doing reinspection of our water sources, as well as remediation of our lead-based paint and dust in those child-occupied areas. Filter changes will be completed, and some building envelope items such as window replacements, as well as some upgrades to our athletic fields. My last slide gives a summary and a breakdown with the associated costs for the recommendations presented. The grand total of these projects is over $8 million. However, these recommendations will help to provide better utilization of our buildings and improve our schools to create a clean and safe atmosphere where students can learn and teachers can teach. This concludes the presentation. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Board, are there any questions? Again, we are still finalizing everything that's in this proposal. The main components are obviously the moves, as well as the transfers, or the moves of persons move out of the building, but also some of the summer cleaning and those kinds of things. I do want to call your attention to the summer readiness project recommendation, which is the reinspection of water sources that have lead in them, 10 parts per billion, and also the remediation of lead paint in child-occupied areas. Those two costs are about $600,000. There have been some reach out, some parent groups relative to fences. It is my recommendation that our vendor come back on the 13th to provide the board with an update relative to lead. I know the board has received some questions regarding that, to give you an update where we are in that space. We've already talked about it, about having Jeff Faust, our expert, come back to give the board an update around lead in our buildings and what we're doing to address it, especially with some requests coming about fences. And that's not included on this particular presentation. Questions that the board might have?
Yes, Dr. Adams, I have a question about how do you go about documenting the assets of the district? I've noticed over the years, I think since 2006, I've asked this question. When a building closes or you receive new materials or computers or what have you, who's responsible for documenting all of those assets, and where would those assets be listed so that we have a running list or an inventory of all the things that we currently have for our students?
Done by finance. Finance has a team of 2 individuals that go around and do an inventory of our computers and other items that we deem to need to be inventoried.
So you're saying that if I contact Ms. Banks or someone in her office, that they have a list of each school, like the schools that you're decommissioning or you're moving, you currently have a list of all the items that are currently in those buildings?
With the decommissioning schools, we take pictures. Well, first of all, we go around and we take pictures of the building as is now. Because again, before we start decommissioning, sometime items, for trying to be a polite way, sometimes things walk. So our first thing we do is we go around in these schools that decommission and take pictures. Then as we go back, then we will take those items, and those items that are not transferred to another facility within the districts, they're taken to the warehouse where they're housed and documented for future disbursement, use, et cetera.
So yes, Ms. Banks does have a list of the fixed assets. There's a legal requirement in terms of a cost that we keep for all of the fixed assets. So yes, we do have a school by school breakdown on computers and anything above a certain cost.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And just to follow up on that, is there a requirement for every building to have an inventory?
A fixed asset, yes, we have a fixed asset for all of our schools above a certain cost. We may not have paper and pencil, those kind of items, but we're talking about fixed asset costs that we use title and general budget dollars. So I don't know what the cost off the top of my head. I want to say above $500, we have a fixed asset cost.
Dr. Adams, this is one question I'm sorry, this is what I wanted to ask. When you start this moving process, will there be someone in the district to videotape the building inside and out as you go about this process? So that, like a walkthrough, and if someone wants to look at the buildings and what condition it's in, to just analyze the building in general.
I don't know if I understand the questions. I said before, we will take pictures of the school itself. Our director of real estate, Mr. Gaffney, will do a walkthrough and look at the building from a real estate perspective and whatever. So that will be done. But besides taking a videotape, that's not something we do, but we will take pictures of the building, multiple pictures of the building, of the structures, the windows, also their stained glass, et cetera. Those type of things we will document and take pictures of those. And those things that are, we consider them as bad, we will actually remove it from the building and take it to the warehouse. One thing that we found out that the brass knobs on the staircases and things like that, we will remove those and take them. And then if we ever reopen a building, as we have done before, recommission the building, then we could take those back to the building.
Right. I know I had a conversation with a few people in administration about videotaping the entire building and making it available to the public so the public can see what the buildings look like, before or whatever, or after, so that we'll know what we have. That was it. Thank you.
Yes, I don't think that's a big problem to do that. To take pictures or the video, I think we could do.
Yeah, we can do that. That's not
Yes.
a problem. We did talk about that because we could not allow persons in the buildings right now that we were looking to sell. So yes, that we can do that. I know I talked to Walker about it.
I have a question for you. I'm looking at page 1 regarding the moving and logistic recommendations. And so I see that the RFP will need to put one out for the disassembling and also the reinstalling of some of the furniture and equipment. So as it relates to the summer readiness project recommendations, have all these been put out for an RFP, or are we going with current vendors on these? Where are we getting the numbers from?
So to answer your question, you asked, are the summer readiness projects, have they already been out for RFP?
Yes.
Most of the projects have already been out for RFP. So most of the costs, we've already received actual bids from the vendor. There are some that we still actually have out, such as the window replacement for both Nottingham and Central. The ones in red are also guesstimates based on, and those RFPs will be coming out soon as possible.
Okay. Do we have more than one vendor on most of these that we looked at to make sure we're getting the best pricing?
Yes, so generally the process involves that we do open it up to all those that would like to bid, and only those bidders that actually meet our requirements, meet the standards, are the ones that we would recommend and bring forth to the board for approval.
No, understood. I get the process. Again, the question is, were there more than one? So like on these, were there multiple people, or were some of these that we have out here for estimated costs, or did one person just bid on the specific item?
So for example, the painting RFP, that is one that we would probably use multiple vendors. Even the decommissioning of moving, we would more than likely use more than one vendor to do for that whole process. So yes, we do use multiple vendors, multiple contractors on some of these RFPs.
Okay. All right, thank you so much.
Mr. Watson, thank you for the presentation. You mentioned that with the COVID, or with the CDC guidelines due to COVID, we have to do certain things. So my question, I guess, for you and Dr. Adams, I know we ask this every single meeting, but I think it's important to come up, but are we anticipating being able to use some of those COVID relief dollars to pay for those purchases, since they are coming directly because of new guidelines due to COVID, as opposed to using like our general operating budget?
Some general operating budget and some COVID. Things like the filters, obviously COVID, some that to do with ventilation, COVID, some of the furniture, COVID, because of this 3 feet, 6 feet distancing. So we go through each one of these to determine how we can use COVID dollars to support it. Some cannot be covered by COVID, but we tried our best to align the cost of COVID since those are one-time dollars targeted for that purpose.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And we could come back once we complete this and give you kind of like an analysis, which ones were COVID funding and which ones were not COVID funding. And Ms. Banks plays a big part in this as well because she understands what we have to have as an accountability piece.
Gotcha. Thank you. And Ms. Watson, you said that so CSMB would go to Cleveland, the head would go into CSMB, and then what would happen to the current building on South Grand that the head Chapman's in?
Yeah, you that building?
Yeah.
So at this point in time, until we make some of those capital improvements, because the windows are really poor condition, that building will more likely just be unoccupied until we're able to get the additional fundings to make those improvements to those buildings in particular. Now, the Naheed Chapman building will still be of use because most of the staff generally are in the Naheed Chapman building, but you are able to access from Naheed Chapman to Wyman. There is a gate that's accessible for both of those buildings.
Gotcha. Okay. And then my last question. So I know that this is just an estimate right now, the 8 million for this, I guess, summer cost. Do you have an idea of what the 2020 or 2019 number was, or the ballpark for this time last year, just for a comparison? And if you don't have it off the top of your head, is that something that you could bring back for our next, just so we can see like where we're trending?
Will do. We will provide that information to you.
Thank you.
A couple questions. Also, for all the dollars that we spend that are not COVID related, are those within the budget guidelines we have for this this particular school period? Are they budgeted dollars already?
So we do have some monies. We do have a capital project fund. Or budget that we generally use for some of these projects, but some of these projects we would more than likely be requesting additional funds for.
I see. Also, the question, I have just another question regarding the programs like the culinary program, the cosmetology program. I assume the students will be transferred to these new facilities. How would they get there? Are these students provided transportation to these different programs, or is that part of the cost that we have to consider?
So at this point in time, the students go to Beaumont for the program. It has been problematic for us because of the schedules for students. There's some are going in the morning, some are going in the afternoon. Those students who want to continue in those programs will likely transfer to those schools such that they can participate in the programs that those schools are in. So that is what is likely going to occur. It was minimally used this year because we were in a pandemic, so many kids didn't go anywhere. They were doing everything virtually, so they were not going anywhere. So as we look to revision what happens at Gateway and Vashon, it will help also build the elective components of those schools that traditionally did not have those kind of electives, similar to what I recommended to the board when we closed down other high schools.
Okay, great. And just to follow up on Donna's question regarding the assets, I mean, I assume, and so I have an assumption in my mind, but let me ask, does the school district have a like a tag system for all fixed assets where we put fixed asset tags on them so they're easily monitored where they go and where and how much they, the depreciation on all that kind of stuff? Or do we rely on pictures only, or is there some kind of asset tag system that we use?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Yes, especially for title, federal funded. Yes, there is a tag that goes on the equipment.
Okay, great, thank you.
Again, it's based on the cost of the equipment.
Right, you have a cap on what you capitalize, yes.
Dr. Adams, could you speak to the capital improvement fund very briefly for me? It was mentioned, so where does the funding come from that's allocated to capital improvement?
Normally, it's the two sources, general operating budget dollars. I think the budget that they have is around $3 or $4 million, if I'm correct, somewhere in that space. And it varies from year to year. When we did Gateway Field, it was $1.5 additional million. And then when we do bonds, We have not done a bond. We, as Mrs. Banks indicated to the board previously, the board does have capacity to go to voters to ask them to support a bond. We have not had that conversation or discussion, but those are the two sources: general operating budget dollars and bond dollars once they are approved.
So as it stands, our GOB will report the capital that's outlined in this report.
Or some of the stimulus dollars if it's specific to that. And again, these are recommendations. We are still going to kind of go back, the team, and make some possible further adjustments. But as they are putting forth the presentation tonight, this is what they are recommending to us.
Dr. Adams, with the programs being taken out of Beaumont, the hair program and the other program, so what's going to happen to Beaumont now?
That's an excellent question, Ms. Jones. We have talked about it as an idea of what to do with Beaumont. We don't want to, we talked about that today in our meeting. We don't want to leave the building unoccupied. And so we are still working on what a strategy might be to support something in Beaumont. As you know, we are closing 7 schools and 2 offers are on right now. 2 we plan on keeping open. And we have not come up with a strategy of what to do with Beaumont right now. It is a massive building, as you already know, and it's becoming much more challenging to keep it up. And so we don't have an idea as we sit here tonight about what we're going to do with Beaumont.
Okay, so for clarification, can you give me the names of the schools that are being decommissioned?
It's the schools that we closed. It's simply the schools that we closed. It will be Northwest. It will be every school that we close. Northwest, Ford, Farragut, Fanning, Clay. It would be all 7 schools that we close. We still have to decommission the building, even if we're selling it, in terms of taking everything out of it, moving everything out, turning off the electricity, the gas, taking care of any kind of piping and those kinds of things. So it's every single one of the 7 buildings that we're closing.
So does that include Cleveland?
Cleveland is not going to be decommissioned because we're transferring CSMB into it. So we'll clean it out, get it ready for the transfer of CSMB to the building. Because obviously the building is only half, Central is using 1/2 and the other half is going to be unoccupied for a short period of time until we move a CSMB in it.
So then Gallaudet will also be decommissioned?
Gallaudet,
It will be moved.
we're just moving the stuff out over to the Wyman side. It won't necessarily be fully decommissioned as all of these other buildings are being done. We'll be moving the material out to the Wyman site because the bulk of the site is being used. It's the first part of the building, only a small group of students. Well, I take that back. The middle school is really in the Gallaudet building, but they're not necessarily occupying the whole building. It's really the K5 that's in the 3-tier buildings, yeah.
So for on slide 5 then, so the 3 elementary schools are Ford, Farragut, and Clay. And the middle school is Fanning, and then the 2 high schools are Northwest and.
I'm sorry, let me get to slide 5.
On Cleveland, we will just be moving Cleveland from Cleveland to Miller. Right? Yeah, that's just a move, so that's really not a decommissioning. But decommissioning is when we close it totally down.
So there are 2 high schools. What's the second?
Well, we probably need to say move instead of decommission.
Yeah, that probably needs to be
We should have
corrected.
said
Yeah.
move instead of decommission Cleveland.
Yeah, it's actually decommissioning 1 school and then moving one of the high schools from Cleveland over to where we are now in Miller.
So ultimately then with that correction, the moving list and the decommissioning list is the same?
You say would it be less?
Is the same, like the schools on I'm trying to understand the distinction between decommission and the moves.
So you want to kind of walk through decommission as opposed to just moving?
Well, I understand the process.
Okay.
The name, which buildings are being affected
Oh,
kind of
I'm
in
sorry.
each category.
We would make a correction for the high school to put 1 school that would be decommissioned and 1 school would be moved. That would be the correction that we would make here. Northwest decommission, nobody's moving in it right now, and moving Cleveland's material over to Miller. That would be the correction that would be made.
So then the materials and assets that are at Beaumont, are they also being moved to the programs that are going, or to the schools that are going to house the program?
That is correct. Just those, but because Beaumont is a program-managed school, we're only moving that particular equipment, and that's why you saw an RFP that will likely need to go out to make that move take place, because it's not the entire building. Quite frankly, Beaumont has already been quasi-decommissioned several years ago when we closed it. We opened back certain wings such that the programs could still be utilized in those particular buildings. So it wouldn't be a full decommission. It would be moving some of the materials out of the first floor where the programs are. It's only one wing that we're using right now. It's not the whole building.
So then as you move through this process with obtaining bids and kind of going further through, will we continue to get updates on what is happening at each building, whether it's being decommissioned or moved?
Yes, the board will likely have to approve something, as Mr. Watson indicated, as a walk-on, because the timing of this is going to be incredibly important for us to try to get it done before school opens. So it may not be that you get it for a first and second read, but only for a first read for approval. Likely at the April or May meeting, no, not the April meeting, but likely the May meeting.
So how have we communicated with the families at the schools that are moving? So for CSMB and Naheed Chapman, and then the students in the programs at Beaumont, how have they been informed about this?
So CSMB, a survey was done. We have not come, this is a recommendation. So after the meeting tonight, depending upon what kind of feedback we get from the board, we will start the communication process. But CSMB did complete a survey about a particular move. Naheed Chapman is just walking across the street. We will notify them of that. And from a program perspective, we have not had any conversations with any kids about whether programs might be moving yet. So minimal conversation. We wanted to bring it before the board first. And so that's why we have not, other than CSMB, where we did do a survey, an extensive survey about what they thought, but we did meet with the advisory group to let them know what we were thinking about. And the principal is aware, but we have not communicated where yet, because this meeting was happening before that.
I'd like to come back to Beaumont. Is there, have you given consideration to some kind of plan that will engage the community around reimagining Beaumont? And if so, can we get some kind of tentative timeline around that?
We have not. I have not, quite frankly. Dr. Roberts even thought about it. At this point in time, Beaumont is a massive building that I don't see us reimagining as a new school building for us. I do think that it has some ability to be utilized in some way, shape, or form, but no, we have not had that conversation. Again, we are still utilizing the building right now. The board has to say yes to what we are presenting tonight, not in a formal way, but give consent for it, and then we'll come back to talk about the idea of what might happen with Beaumont moving forward. There have been some conversations even before this that other parties were interested in Beaumont School, but we have not had any conversation beyond tonight.
Dr. Adams, I would just like to ask at this time that by the time we meet or have our next board meeting, that our new mayor, whomever that might be, consider stepping to the district and offering up some assistance in that area. And it's in particular Beaumont and all of our schools to help, because the school district really needs that help ASAP. And so I'm just really looking forward to the public asking whomever is going to be the mayor to make St. Louis Public Schools a priority at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Dr. Adams, I want to go back to Dr. Roberts' point, because I think she made an excellent point. I think if we come back with recommendations, or you come back with recommendations that we vote on to effectively move programs out of Beaumont, and now there are no programs in Beaumont, then subsequently there will be another recommendation to either close or decommission or sell Beaumont. So I think that to Dr. Roberts' point, there may be, before we get to that point, I think there probably does need to be a discussion or something, either amongst the board or some additional recommendations for what Beaumont would look like, because again, that's essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, what a approval of recommendations to effectively move all the programs out of that building would do.
If I understand correctly, what you're asking for is to have a recommendation of what's going to happen to Beaumont prior to the board making some kind of indication about the programs. Am I correct?
Yes.
Got it. We will do that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I agree with Adam, because I guess as I'm listening here, I'm a little concerned that even though Beaumont is not a traditional school, I think I would have rather had that discussion about Beaumont as what's going to happen to it as we were talking about closing schools, because I almost feel like we're going back to another decision. Do we get rid of something that's important to our community? So I would strongly recommend us having some kind of understanding of what we're going to do with that building in that community before moving forward to moving another program out. To me, this should have been dealt with as we were talking about closing schools and included other programs. I'm a little, shocked, I should say, that did not come up in the discussion.
So Beaumont was an afterthought. The board could say no, we could keep programs there and have minimum number of kids and not support it. The challenge here is that throughout the pandemic, the small number of kids that were going into the building made us look at it in a different kind of way. There is an increase of transportation, not increase, but transportation costs. And quite frankly, there are less than 100 kids that are actually taking advantage of the programs. The pandemic made that even much more problematic. So you are correct. It wasn't something that we thought about initially. It came after we started looking at the possible moves of even moving CSMB and the dollars we were paying for portables. So you are correct. Madam Board Member, it is likely something that should have been discussed prior to, but the conditions changed after we started looking at what needed to be moved. And so that's why it came to the table, it's coming to the table at this point in time. If the board says no, then those programs will stay where they are.
So any reason for CSMB not being considered for a move to Beaumont?
Any reason, I'm sorry?
For CSMB not being considered for a move to Beaumont?
CSMB has about 283 students. Beaumont can accommodate approximately 1,500 kids. It would only be a drop in the bucket in that building. Again, as I think I shared with the board, there was some conversation as we were talking about possibly using Sumner as one of the sites, if what purpose it could be for CSMB as well. And because of the sheer size of the building, it just swallows it up. It would just be overwhelming to try to keep that entire building open for about 283 kids. And they have they expect to have a max of about 300, but it's, Beaumont is such a massive building that the footprint is just that large.
And the largest school we have is Gateway, correct?
Gateway High School with about 1,000 students.
So to Adam's point, we're expecting to have a brand new nursing college, not far from, right down the street from Vashon. And it would be just a stone throw away from Beaumont. So I understand what you're saying about the 238 students from the program, the CSB program. But could we consider that or give it some more thought a little bit there?
Yes, I think the board has asked me to come back prior to any recommendation for programs at Beaumont to come back with a plan for what happens with Beaumont. And so I think I hear the board loud and clear prior to any kind of recommendation about the Beaumont programs being moved out.
And I'd just like to follow up. My question wasn't about the programs being moved out, because I have been to Beaumont and seen those programs in operation. And I've also seen the number of kids in attendance. I'm getting to the point where we can reimagine Beaumont much like a community education full service, and we have the community engaged around that. And at one time, the city of St. Louis supported community, full service community. And just like the district, they're getting $500 million in COVID funds as well. And this might be a possibility to engage the city in putting together a full-service community school on that site. So it wasn't so much about the few kids as it was about the many in the community taking advantage and partnering with the city to do that.
I hear you, Dr. Robinson. So I kind of want to restate so I'm clear. So the issue is really not the programs moving. The issue is what we do with Beaumont and how we collaborate with the community and maybe the city to try to reimagine that particular building to be utilized holistically for the community.
Exactly. And I open that up to anyone else, but that was my thinking around it.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure if I think that's a great idea if we can do that and get the city's participation, but I would like us to, if that doesn't happen, to also reimagine it with some of these programs, if possible, if there's an argument for it. If there's not, then, you know, we want that made clear, but I don't want us to limit it to just that. I think Beaumont, of course, is an important school too, for those of us who grew up in St. Louis. And I think that, you know, it starts the, you know, debate and conversation all over again about some of these schools. So I would like us to reimagine Beaumont on several angles, not just one. And if we need to rule out all of them, that's fine, but let's go through the work of reimagining it from several angles so we can make the right decision about Beaumont.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Ms. Vanoy, you have an item on the agenda I thought that I would speak to. It didn't come up tonight, but I wanted to give Ms. Vanoy an opportunity to walk through quickly an update around technology. The board raised an issue that we are wanting to address before the board and the public as we look at the increase in the an item that was formerly $3 million to $6 million as it relates to technology for next year. So iPad 5th and 6th generation refresh, Mrs. Vanoy.
Thank you. Tonight, I would like to share an upcoming project that we're working on that involves selling our current 5th and 6th generation iPads. I'll share some information related to the costs that it will take to do this. I'll discuss a new opportunity as it relates to our families, and finally answer any questions that you may have. Currently, we have approximately 11,589 5th and 6th generation iPad devices. We were one of the first school districts in the area to use iPads in our 3rd grade classrooms as far back as 2012 with the very first generation. We have progressed with offering iPads to additional grade levels since that time. And as you know, we're in a full one-to-one device with all students in pre-K to 8th grade for this school year. We've actually refreshed iPads in the past 3 years with the ability to receive money for our old devices, which reduced the amount of the actual cost of the new device. We have an opportunity to work with a company to sell back these 11,589 iPads at a much higher buyback than in years before. You can see on the screen that buyback could be as low as $150 per device to as high as $201, depending on the quality of the device. In the past, the most that we typically received was no more than $69 per device. To replace these 11,589 iPads, we're recommending that we purchase the 8th generation iPad, which is the same model that we purchased last spring when we bought the 8,000. It will also include a more rugged case than we currently have, but probably the most significant change would be to include the 3-year Apple Care service. This provides a possibility of actually breaking a specific device 6 times over the 3 years with no fees added. It would also include the replacement of chargers and cables that break without a cost. It also includes an internal cell phone, so we wouldn't need the hotspots. When we previously refreshed the iPads, the case for the cost, the entire product was $321.24 per device. The iPad was $299, the case was $22.24. With the new offerings from Apple, we will get the iPad, the more rugged case, the Apple Care warranty, and the internal cell phone for $462.95. That increased cost is only $141.71 per device. The table at the bottom shows the overall financial impact. To sell the 11,589 iPads, we could receive as much as $2.3 million in rebates. The new price that includes all the information on the right-hand side of the screen would cost $5,365,000. When you calculate the difference with the buyback included, the overall actual expenditure would be $3,035,748. So we always look at pros and cons. So from pros, you can see that the screen is really full, but I just want to highlight a couple of individual pieces of equipment. Currently, if the iPad is broken, and typically we all know it's the screen, we're charging the parents $320 because we can't repair the screen. If the audio port breaks, we can sometimes repair that, but the majority of our breakage has been the actual screen. With the situation that we're recommending, we would only charge the parents $70. That's similar to a self-insured insurance policy that we looked at last spring that we really couldn't find a good cost to provide to our parents. So it's like a self-funding insurance program. We're currently offering hotspots. We have 6,000 out on the street right now. And that means that families who need a hotspot really have two devices. They have the iPad and they have the hotspot. With the new purchase, that internal cell phone would be the hotspot. So parents and children would only have to keep track of one device. For those that need the hotspot feature, we can turn on their data plan, but not everybody needs it. But we would still have the capability to turn it on if someone needed it for a specific month or for half of a quarter. If the internal cell phone breaks, it would be covered under the same Apple Care. We currently cannot geocode, we cannot locate hotspots if they're lost or stolen, but we can iPads, and we've been very successful in finding equipment that's been lost or stolen and are able to get it back. With the cell phone in the internal iPad, we would also be able to geocode that hotspot. The other thing that I want to share is currently you can have 10 people on a hotspot. With the new program, it would be a specific student on the iPad's hotspot internally. As you get 3, 4, 5 people on a hotspot, the speed does slow down. So this will allow us to keep the same speed because one student will be on one hotspot. We have actually found that many family members are adding themselves to the hotspot and slowing down some of the work for the students. And probably the last comment I want to share is this is kind of like refinancing your house. The market's really hot right now. So with them offering between 150 to 201 for each of the buyback devices, we really think this is the best decision. So we have 2 cons, not as many pros as we did cons, but cons are it's going to take some time to roll out 12,000 iPads. On the previous discussion, you guys asked about the fixed assets. So we physically asset tag every device. And that asset tag is added into our mobile device management system, our MDM system. And that's how we're able to track it by that asset code. So it's going to take a little bit of time for us to roll out 12,000. And the other situation is the buyback company wants to come in around the end of August. So in order for us to have the devices ready to sell back, we have to work hard to get the devices back that are in students' hands right now. And I will answer any questions that you might have.
I just have a few questions. That $150 to 201, is that guaranteed or is that just their suggested price, assuming that the iPads are in good condition, or will they come back and say, oh, determine what's good or define what's good on their terms and then
Sure.
offer a lower price?
There's an A, B, C, D rating. And when we first sold back our original iPads in 2012, we actually paid to have St. Louis Public engraved on them. What we found was that was a hard buyback because people didn't want that on there. So we did receive some lesser amount because of the engraving that was on there. So we don't do that anymore. But they will physically look at every device. And if it's not an A level, which would be the 201, then it could go down to B, C, or D. The 150 is actually the D level. So we're going to be in between the 150 and the 201. I don't think every iPad will be $201, but I don't think every iPad will be 150 either.
And then on the, with the iPad having an internal phone, to have the hotspot, you still have to pay for that, right?
So we will continue to pay for that.
Okay, you will pay for the
Yes.
hotspot on the inside for the internal phone.
Correct. We've
Okay.
already reached out to our vendor that we're using right now, and they're actually going to cut the monthly cost from $22.40 to $13 a month, and it's unlimited.
Is there a way that, if parents say, can I get, a lesser charge if something happens to the iPad if my child just uses our Wi-Fi? Is there some way they could get some kind of discount instead of turning on the hotspot in the internal phone?
So we will have to keep some hotspots because the laptops for the high schools will still possibly need them. So we won't get rid of all 6,000. So we will have a capability of providing a hotspot, but our preference would be to let the students use the one that's in the iPad. So it's one device.
I guess what I was asking, for instance, I just got a hotspot on my iPhone, but I didn't have one. I got it so that I could run the internet here. But when I was at home, I always just used, Wi-Fi. If homes had Wi-Fi, is there any way that they could be discounted for using Wi-Fi instead of having hotspots?
So we're not charging the parents unless something breaks.
Okay.
So
Well,
they're not
okay.
paying for that monthly cost, whether it's on or off. It's strictly a loan of the device, and a payment only comes into play if something's broken. Am I answering your question?
Not really, but
Okay.
I'm not sure if I'm asking it right.
Okay.
So if I understand correctly, what Mrs. Fowler is asking is, if someone has an iPad at home and they don't want to use our internet access to Wi-Fi or hotspot, and they have Wi-Fi at home, is there a cost? And the answer is no, because
No.
they're using their Wi-Fi at home.
Correct.
So they're no cost at all. We loan them the iPad, they use the iPad, they have Wi-Fi at home, they connect to Wi-Fi at home, and they use it just like they're using their own computer at home.
But there is a cost to the district though, right?
There is
Because
no
if they
cost.
huh?
No,
Oh, there isn't.
there is not a cost.
really?
If they're
Okay.
using their own Wi-Fi, there is no cost to the district.
Okay, so the district only pays for the
6,000.
hotspot if someone's using it.
Correct.
That
Okay,
is
that's
correct.
what I was
Correct.
concerned
Correct.
about. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry about that.
So Ms. Vano, you said that the hotspot or cellular can be turned on if needed. So who or what determines the need?
So we have those technology inventory coordinators, we call them the TICs in each building, and they know their families and can usually assist in whether it's really needed or not. What we found last spring was there weren't a lot that needed it because AT&T and Charter were offering some of those opportunities, but those kind of dried up. So it's a conversation between the principal, the family community specialist, the TIC, to determine if the student needs assistance. I don't think we've turned anybody down. When we first started this in the spring, we had 2,000 hotspots. We've ordered 4,000 more because we saw that need. So every time we survey our parents, we say, do you have a device? Do you need internet at home? And we use that information in order to determine who has the hotspot or who we will turn the iPad on.
Gotcha. And do the built-in, the cellular hotspots, do those have a data limit?
No, it's unlimited. It's unlimited with the hotspots right now, and it's going to be unlimited with the cell phones.
Gotcha. And then, so with the buyback company, do we have like a contract with them that we're going to be approving? Or-
So we work through Apple, and we've worked through Apple the last couple of times, and they know who's in the market for those things. And so it's kind of a coordination between us and Apple, and they bring, so this is a company that we haven't used before. But they're saying that they're giving the best, and they've had good experience with them. There wasn't anything wrong with the other company that we've used in the past. They just recommended this one this time. So it's an agreement with us and Apple.
Okay. So my reason for asking that question, so I know we're trying to get these iPads back, but I want to know, is there a floor for the number of iPads that they're like, well, if you don't get above this amount, then
No.
we're not gonna.
I'm sure this company will do the same. The last one that we dealt with, they actually came back 3 different times. So they want a large percentage of them in August, and we want a large percent of them August, to be honest with you. It's going to be hard to store what we currently have on the street and 12,000 new. So we want to get as many back as we can, but they're not going to shut us down because we don't give them exactly 11,000 on August 14th.
Okay. And then my last question is, other than time, what do you anticipate some barriers being to getting all these iPads back by the start of, well,
Getting
by
the
summer?
iPads back or getting the new ones rolled out?
iPads back.
Back?
Mhm.
So if you remember at a presentation we did in the fall, I think we had like 900 that didn't come back from last spring. We're now down to about 350. So we've been able to identify more and go get them through that geocoding. I have enough inventory with the existing 8,000 that we could probably cover 2,000 to 3,000 and still be okay. But that isn't my preference because I really want to have one device that has the internal cell phone already. So we're going to push as hard as we can. Students that go to summer school, we won't have them return theirs until after summer school. We're going to work with the TICs, with their families that they distributed to get the equipment back, which is different than what we did last spring and even last fall.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So is the buyback process and the ordering of the new iPads, are those two processes linked?
Not necessarily. We would have to order the 12,000 as quickly as we can once it's approved, and the buyback would occur later in August. And they would probably come back in October or possibly December if we had more to give.
Okay, so we are able to order the full 12,000 ahead of, prior to receiving that buyback amount?
With that amendment that we've put in the board resolution, because that'll go over the 3 million.
Okay, and do we have a commitment from Apple or some other supplier that they have 12,000 to sell us?
We do.
Okay.
In fact, every time I open my email, Apple has reduced the cost again. So they're wanting us to do this, and they have already committed to having this inventory set to the side.
Okay, because I know in the summer and fall, it was like a national shortage of technology, and you don't anticipate that will be a problem.
I don't. The inventory issue we had was with the laptops, the Dell Intel piece that's part of the laptop. We received the 8,000 iPads very quickly. And I should have highlighted this on the pros. In the past, we've used a different case vendor. So we would order the iPads, and that would be 6 to 8 weeks. Then we'd have to wait another 6 to 8 weeks for the case. And we don't want to send the iPads out without a case. So it was a 12-week process sometimes. With buying it through Apple, it'll come already cased at the same time. So we're saving some time there. And for those of you that don't know, we have different colors of the cases. So depending on your grade level, you might have a green, a lime green, or a teal. We do that for tracking purposes, and the Apple new vendor will allow us to keep those same colors.
Will you be able to use the COVID relief dollars to buy the 12,000?
That's the plan. I have spoken with Angie Banks, and we can certainly use some of the CARES dollars. She's very good at complying to the needs and making sure that we're using the right money at the right time, because there is a timeline on some of that. So I do think she's anticipating the CARES dollar, but that hasn't been finalized yet.
And to follow up on that, is it the E-rate funding pays for this as well? So are we going between the two funding streams?
So E-rate won't pay for devices like this. E-rate pays for wiring and cabling and switches and Wi-Fi appliances, but they won't pay for iPads, and they won't, at this point, pay for hotspots. There is some new regulations that are going to be released with the latest funding from the federal government that may impact E-rate. But for the current filing, which you approved at the March meeting, the hotspots were not in there because it wasn't a valid cost.
Thank you, Ms. Van Oy. No other
Thank you.
questions this time. I have really one quick 2022 consolidation update. I provided the board with one on February the 9th, I think it was, and on the 29th. And so I want to give the board a quick update of where we are. Thank you very much. In terms of recruitment, about 83% of our students have been captured before spring break. We picked up an additional 12 families this week. And we have 66 families we have not been able to contact at this point in time. In terms of the budget, our question came relative to the school budgets. We're looking to increase the elementary budgets from the original amount to about $173, which is about a 40% increase. We were recommending about $125. But when we make the budget presentation to the board on the 13th, you will see that all elementary budgets have been adjusted. It was going to cost about another $250,000 for that to occur. But we thought it was a good recommendation. We looked at the budgets, and so we are going to be making that adjustments to the elementary budget. In terms of the student support, the nurses, counselors, family community specialists, and social workers have been filled. The positions that right now are unfilled are the safety officers, about 27, and custodial staff. We're still working to try to fill all of those positions as we get ready for the beginning of next year. And obviously the team is working really hard to do that. In terms of the literacy reading piece, the positions have been advertised or are being advertised as we speak. I think it was supposed to take place today, as a matter of fact, and the textbook adoptions are being reviewed. On next board meeting, you will receive a walk-on item for first review with an approval in May for the textbooks that will be associated with reading and literacy program. The internship program, this is a little premature. The interviews took place on Monday regarding the director. I'm meeting with that person on Friday. And also a vendor has been selected, and we are negotiating relative to the vendor who will be managing and supporting the program. And lastly, the electives are still being developed and confirmed. Obviously, there was some conversation tonight regarding the Beaumont program, and so some of that is going to be germane to what the board, or what we come back to the board as it relates to the Beaumont program in terms of how many electives are going to be increased at school. So this was just a really quick update about where we are. Obviously, we are massaging this on a regular basis to look to see exactly what needs to be done. But I want to give the board a quick update, a snapshot of the consolidation update. Does the board have any questions? I know this was quick and fast, but I want to give the board some update.
I just have one under literacy and reading.
Yes, ma'am.
Has there been a movement around the development of the individual reading plan template for kids? And since all teachers are reading teachers, has there been any plans for professional development to support that?
Yes, as we work with our vendor around the textbook adoption, that is one of the things that we discussed today. In terms of the template, there's not been any necessarily change around the template. We already have a template. It's about providing professional development to make sure that it's actually used. I will say this at this point in time, because I know that it came up before and I was going to address it on the 13th. I will be coming back to the board on the 13th to ask the board to reduce the calendar. Right now, the last day of school is June the 4th. We have enough days built in that we could actually end school the Friday before Memorial Day for students and give us enough time Dr. Roberts, for the kinds of things you're talking about in the first, second, third, and fourth. Number one, it helps us get prepared for summer school. Number two, it allows us to have professional development with staff and also for staff to celebrate after the kind of year we've had. I think this was one of the kinds of things that Mr. Lane was referring to at the last board meeting. And we also have 2 weeks of PD at the beginning of the year when we normally have 5 to 6 days. So we think, Dr. Roberts, that we'll have some time before teachers leave for PD as well as an extended amount of time before they come back to address what you're referencing as it relates to the reading PD for the new textbook adoption, as well as the PD around the template. Any other questions the board might have? Thank you.
So our agenda also includes a budget update. Are we having that presentation this evening?
I'll give you the verbal update. Ms. Banks did not really need to come tonight. We had very minimal, sorry, let me pull my document. Madam President, I can't find my sheet in front of me, but I'll give you a quick update from my memory. We did not have any responses to the any information put on the website for us. There was no feedback at all. We had 3 meetings, and in those 3 meetings, there were approximately 20 people who participated to all 3 meetings, and we answered the questions. There were several questions that I sent to the board prior to the 13th, but there are minimal adjustments to the budget outside of the elementary update that I referenced just now in the presentation. But I will send the board prior to the 13th. But what we presented to the board, we feel comfortable is consistent with what we'll be bringing to the board on the 13th, outside of that one recommendation, as I indicated, about the elementary budgets increasing. I apologize, I left it upstairs in the room.
Are there any questions on the budget? So the next item on our agenda is a professional development request by Dr. Roberts. So I will turn it over to Dr. Roberts to share this request.
It's the annual legislative forum in Jefferson City. And my commitment has been to be the best board member I can be. And one of the ways to do that is to attend professional development. And as always, I'll bring back what I learned and share with the board.
So the cost for this is $75, is that correct?
Yes, because I'll be traveling to Jeff City so that I can interface with the legislature. There's a lot going on around school budgets, and I'd like an opportunity to interact with them.
So to be clear, this event is open to any board member that wants to participate. So I would ask that this motion be made to be not specific to Dr. Roberts, but to approve professional development or to approve the attendance and cost of participating in the legislative forum.
I would like to make a motion that this board approve the cost and attendance for this legislative forum, open to all board members.
Second.
Any questions or discussion on this item? Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
So if you, so Dr. Roberts, we will get you registered. If anyone else would like to attend, please let me know if you can by the end of the day tomorrow, so all of those registrations can be completed and processed. So it is taking place on Monday, April 12th. Adam, you have a proposed standing budget committee.
Yep. Dorothy, thank you for whoever printed it out. Thanks for printing this out. So this says motion for a new standing committee, but the actual motion language is F. Points A through E just outlines what the ad hoc budget committee has come up with during our time in deliberation. So this is a proposal for the ad hoc budget committee to turn into a standing committee. Just to give some additional historical context, the original purpose of the ad hoc budget committee was to have meetings with the superintendent, district, CFO, and community members to learn and see what the district's budget processes are, and also take an equity-based lens to seeing if the work of the committee and the work that the committee feels is important needed to be housed within a standing committee. That was unequivocally stated yes by this committee. So this is what the committee has come up with. The ad hoc standing committee, ad hoc budget committee has come up with as a proposal. So we are looking to make a motion for proposing to this board that there be a new standing committee called the Standing Committee on Budget, Equity, and Transparency. I'll read the purpose as quickly as I can, and I'll go over the tenets and the structure, because the process is that it operates like most committees of the board, that it does work, gives recommendations, but the purpose is to understand and analyze the district's use of funds and budgeting processes at the district and building level. The committee should assess use and processes for overall effectiveness towards the district's mission and equitable funding of schools, providing recommendations to the board that foster collaboration with the St. Louis community and increase transparency. So in terms of the operations and process, all work recommendations to this board would be housed under that purpose. The tenets, and they're called tenets because they're not goals, and I'll go into the goals after. But these are the 5 tenets. So an increased budget and finance transparency, 1. 2, develop equity-driven budget protocol with the district finance department. 3, effectively increase community input and involvement in the annual budget process. 4, educate the community on the district budget and finance operations. And 5, advocate for state and/or federal change to the funding formula that benefit districts that serve historically underserved populations. Why these are tenets and not goals? The goal is to make sure that they're tenets, but they're really the focuses of the committee. And so every year, these are always the focus, but the goals would vary. So for example, we didn't want to make increased budget and finance transparency a goal to say like, okay, well, now that this is done, this is no longer a goal of the committee, but to understand that there are goals that can be worked on every year to reach these things. For example, with number 2, develop equity-driven budget protocol. A goal for next year would be to, or the first goal of this committee might be to do an equity analysis of the district. So figure out what equity means in a predominantly Black, low-income student of color district and where the inequities are. And then maybe another goal would be to determine what plans and strategies this body could take to address it. So those are the tenets. There'd be goals around it. I'm open to any questions, comments, input that you all have. I'll close with the committee structure. So pretty typical to the current standing committee. There is the note about preferred participation. So we did want to, in the spirit of equity, make sure that if there are people who are in equity-stricken parts of St. Louis and experience equity heavily or inequity heavily, that their voices are represented on this committee. So that's why it says for preferred participation, but that doesn't mean that that's only who can participate. And then I also want to draw your attention to the last potential member or preferred participation member of that, and that's a student representative. So that came up in our last meeting. that the committee felt like it would be very important to have some student representation on that within the structure of the committee. So I just wanted to make sure that you all saw that.
Who are the members currently?
So currently, myself, Dorothy, the superintendent, and Ms. Banks, the CFO. In terms of community, I guess still district staff, Casey Seal Shahid, Dr. Casey Seal Shahid, principal at CVPA High School. Susan Turk, community member, parent, former parent of a student who is in the district. And Gloria Nolan, current parent of district students and community member, and Ray Cummings is his last name. Ray Cummings, who's president of the teacher union. And teacher, correct?
That is correct, 420.
I just wanted to highlight, and I did already mention this to Adam, is that for preferred participation, it doesn't list that it have board member representation, but he did say that that was also a part of the preferred membership, so.
Yeah, so great. Yeah, just from a board member perspective, I assumed it, but didn't write it down, but I will include that in the edits. And in case everyone didn't hear it, board members aren't listed under chairs and members, and that was a mistake and omission. Oversight, we'll say, oversight.
Do you have a target number of members?
It's a good question. I don't. And again, it wouldn't have to be all of these people all the time. But I think I think for preferred participation, this was more for the committee to say, all right, if members do cycle on or off, or if we're considering adding members, this is the lens that we want to have. So it's more of a guiding principle. But I actually don't know if, in terms of our policies or bylaws, if there are limits to the number of committee members we can have.
Adam, I have a question for you. Is there a current process that you have in mind to choose a student representative?
No, I think that would be up to this group to decide. So no, we floated some ideas that it could be someone who is already engaged in their school in some way. So it might be the student council president or a member of the student council or someone who's nominated by the principal in the school or AP. But we don't have a process for that.
Got you. Okay, thank you.
I think one suggestion, and just something for the committee to consider, is that since it's going to have oversight over the district as well as building level budgets, maybe students could participate, in particular at building level reviews, because they'll be more familiar with their own buildings and what's needed there.
Adam, thank you for the report. I like the idea of a student representative, be it at the building level or when you guys meet. I also want to, hopefully we come up with some kind of template for that so that we can move that student representative to the board level. We've talked about it for 3 years, and maybe this year we can really make it happen. Thank you.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. We're creating only one committee, right? Not a separate committee for each school.
Yes. Okay, so I believe that we would be voting on this in April. Is that correct, Dorothy?
It's up to you when you'd like it to be added to the agenda.
All right, so it's my intent to add it to the agenda for April. I guess at this point it would be a walk-on item, but in the meantime, if there are questions Edits, I know I've already gotten some from Regina. Feel free to send them my way. Any way that we can make this better, things that we haven't thought of as a group. Would love to get your input before we vote, so you can all see it in its final version.
I'm going to go back, and I was just thinking about like the student representative position. And I remember that when I was in high school, I was actually on the school board for high schoolers at Gateway. And I know that at each school, there was some type of representation for students that wanted to speak on the issues that were happening in their schools. And then once we were done with that, the school board actually awarded us scholarships to go to college. Like, it was a small scholarship, but they awarded us for our participation. So I'm going to try to look back on that. I know I have an award from that, but just kind of remember how that process happened in order for us to maybe contribute some of those ideas, and also just recognize our students for them wanting to be a part of the process. And then maybe in the future, not just being a part of the budget committee, but once you guys move forward, perhaps having some student representation on other committees as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point and great idea. I think to go along with what Dr. Roberts said, it probably would be easier, at least committee-wise, if we already had like a student board, because then it would just be who from the student board would join the committee. But got to start somewhere, I guess.
Sure.
Great point.
Dr. Adams, do you meet regularly with student representatives from across the district? That might be a place to start.
Not this year because of the pandemic. We have not done so. None at all this year. Last year, we had a regular meeting with student representatives, but none this year through the pandemic.
Oh, I know we haven't met, but you do have a list of students who have engaged with
Yes,
you.
yes, ma'am, I do.
That would
Yes,
be a
ma'am.
place to start.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything else on the budget, proposed budget committee? With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn open session and move back into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones.
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.